In the beginning, there was silence, the kind of silence that hovers right before destiny makes its presence known. A woman, unknown to the world but known in heaven, whispered prayers into the night wind. Her name was Grace Adams. She is a nurse at a local hospital. And though she had little to her name, no wealth, no influence, she possessed something far rarer, a heart full of faith, love that did not waver, and prayers that carried weight beyond the stars. Grace lived with her husband, Michael Adams, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Midtown City. The building groaned with age, its walls thin, its corridors always cold. But within those fragile walls lived warmth, the kind only a woman like Grace could generate. She cooked, she prayed, she loved without asking for return. She believed in Michael even when he stopped believing in himself. Michael was not always the man the world would come to fear and envy. He was once soft-spoken, grateful, a dreamer. But dreams, when laced with unchecked ambition, have a way of turning into obsessions. Some days, Michael would sit at the small table every night, poring over business books with a furrowed brow, his eyes already drifting toward wealth he did not yet possess. So he said,
Grace, one day we won't have to choose between paying our rent or going on vacation. I'll make us rich, you'll see.
I believe in you, Michael, and I'm praying for you, always.
And Grace would smile gently and press her hand over his. Although, the truth is that prayer is patient, but ambition is not. Cedarfield Village, where they were both born, seemed like another world now. In those early years, they had made promises under whispering mango trees, talked about simple things, building a life, maybe a little farm, a family. So a few months later, Michael and Grace decided to leave the village for the city. While trying to make a living, Michael got his first opportunity through a man named Thomas Ayers, a straight-laced entrepreneur who believed in fair dealings. Together they launched a tech startup. Money began to come in like a trickle, then a stream, and eventually a flood. And as it flowed, so did the distance between Michael and Grace. He no longer came home at dinner. He no longer prayed with his wife. And the soft conversation he often had with Grace in the evenings now became loud arguments over bills, over time, over nothing at all. In the morning, when Michael was in the office. Then came Olivia Bennett, whom the enemy has sent to snatch Michael away from Grace. She arrived like perfume in a crowded room. You could smell her before you saw her, and once you did, you never forgot. She was everything Grace was not, loud where Grace was soft, bold where Grace was humble, mysterious where Grace was transparent. Michael had met Olivia a few months ago at a business meeting hosted by Gerald and Linda Douglas, the Midtown's power couple who smiled like saints and dealt like demons. Olivia wore a red dress that night, and Michael shook her, with his gaze which lingered just a second too long. That's all she needed. Then with her voice velvet and venom. She said to him,
You look tired of living small, Michael. You deserve the world. But are you willing to take it?
Meanwhile, back in Michael's apartment, Grace was alone with their daughter Elsie. As Elsie walked close to the mum, she asked,
Mommy, is Daddy still coming home?
Yes, my daughter. He will soon be back.
At midnight, Grace was on her knees. She prayed and cried, even as the bed grew colder. She didn't know that Olivia had moved into Michael's world like a queen onto a chessboard. She didn't know that her husband had started making backdoor deals with Olivia. Grace prayed until morning. Not for riches. Not for revenge. But for her husband's heart and safety. The following day at work, when Thomas knew about Michael's suspicious deals, so he confronted him and said,
We said no shortcuts, Michael. No shady investors. What happened to integrity?
Integrity doesn't pay the bills, Thomas. Wake up. We're not in the village anymore.
Michael has finally been blindfolded by Mammon. One Tuesday morning, Grace went to surprise Michael at his office with lunch, her simple way of holding on. But when she entered the office, what she found was not her husband, but Olivia. Legs crossed, voice like silk, eyes filled with mock sympathy. So Olivia said,
You must be Grace, and I've heard about your reputation for praying. That's sweet.
Grace stood silent, her hands still holding the lunch bag. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked away. But that night, she cried bitterly, and when her voice gave out, her spirit kept praying. She asked the Lord to fight her battles. Meanwhile, Cynthia intensified her enchantment against Michael's spirit. In the hotel room, Michael lost his mind and completely forgot about his family. A few weeks later, Thomas asked Michael to leave the company. Michael became deeply entangled with the Douglas family, whose money flowed from corruption and exploitation. He bought a new home in Midtown, a mansion with gold faucets and no soul. He stopped visiting home entirely. Grace moved back to the village with her daughter. No wealth, no husband. Only silence and whispers. Years passed. Michael's name began to circle among the elite. His empire grew, but so did the rumors, fraud, betrayal, bribes. He silenced every critic, until one couldn't be silenced. James, the driver, once loyal to Michael, went to the police headquarters to report what he found. And just as Michael was about to close the biggest deal of his life, God began to move. While Grace and her daughter was fast asleep, the Holy Spirit spoke to her.
Grace, wake up and pray for your husband, Michael.
Grace's spirit was willing but her flesh was weak. Then she finally woke up and began to pray. In the morning, Grace called Pastor Gideon and explained her encounter. Then Pastor Gideon said,
"The Lord says your husband is building castles on graves."
Quickly, Grace summoned the courage to call Michael and inform him of Pastor Gideon's message, but Michael laughed when he heard it. He said,
These village prophecies don't apply to men like me, Grace. I'm global now.
Grace sat down quietly and was sad. She could read the handwriting on the wall. She knew this wasn't the man she married. And she wasn't going to allow Olivia snatch her husband away, after all they've labored to build together. So she entered a 3-day fasting and prayers. She went to her local church. With the Bible in her hands, she began to declare war against the enemy. Within a week, the storm came. Things began to happen. Gerald and Linda were arrested. Their accounts were frozen. Olivia sold all Michael's properties, packed her things and vanished. The news spread like wildfire. The police continued to arrest other gang members for fraud, drug dealings, and political bribes. Michael lost everything in a single week. He was sad and filled with regrets. One morning, he went to the hospital where his daughter lay sick. He hadn't seen her in months. Inside the pediatric ward, Grace, who is also a professional nurse, is standing beside her daughter, still praying in her spirit. Michael stood there, looking broken, empty, ashamed. He said,
Grace, how's Elsie doing? I'm deeply sorry. I lost everything.
No, Michael. You're just now in position to find everything.
She turned to him, eyes full of tears and mercy. And then, the divine moved. They took Elsie home. When Michael entered the house, he did not bring riches. He brought ruin. Not in his hand, but in his soul. And Grace, that unforgettable woman, the one who loved without reason, who prayed without pause, didn't flinch. She took his brokenness the same way she once took his dreams, with arms wide open and a heart that still believed. No one else would have. Not after the betrayal. Not after the public humiliation. Not after trading a woman of prayer for a woman of power. But Grace had long since stopped living for the applause of people. Her eyes were always fixed on something higher. Someone higher. Michael, no longer in his designer suits, slept on the floor beside Elsie's bed, listening to the beep of monitors and the soft, relentless prayers of Grace. That night, Elsie had a dream. When she woke up, she said,
Daddy, I saw a man in a covered bottle by a strange woman.
Michael froze. With a trembling voice, he asked Elsie,
What else did you see, my daughter?
A woman was praying. I think it was Mommy. She tried to pull the man with her.
This was a deep revelation. 2 weeks later, back in Cedarfield Village, Pastor Gideon gathered the church for a prayer program. Word had spread that Michael had returned, broken, bankrupt, and visibly changed. Some scoffed. Others whispered, "It's too late." But Grace believes that God is merciful and slow to anger. According to Psalms 103 verse 8. Later, Michael confessed everything to the Bible study group. The greed. The pride. The women. The deals. The lies. He simply laid down his shame and begged for forgiveness. So he said,
I had everything, but I lost the only thing that mattered, the woman who never stopped praying for me. I thought she was weak. I thought her faith was foolish. But I now know her prayers were the only reason I didn't die in my sin.
From that day, a new life began. Michael refused offers to rebuild his empire. Instead, he and Grace started a small foundation, helping widows, orphans, and rural youth with dreams too fragile for the city. They would rise early and speak to children about choices and consequences. Michael spoke often about the danger of chasing success without spiritual direction. They worked side by side, not as partners in business, but in purpose. Grace, soft-spoken as ever, led prayer meetings and quiet retreats under mango trees. Their love, once burned by betrayal, became a legacy of redemption. For God is merciful, but he is also just. While Grace and Michael were eating one morning, Michael told her about the stolen money he had kept. And without hesitation, Grace replied and said,
Honey, you must return the money and make it right, even if it costs us everything again.
So that evening, Michael contacted the police officials investigating Gerald and Linda's fraudulent networks. He submitted the evidence he had once hidden. He returned money. And just like that, he was summoned to court. Michael stood trial not as a criminal, but as a witness. But that night, threats came. Olivia, whose location had remained unknown, began to make her incantations. Grace, who was on fasting, woke her husband up, and they started praying. God answered them and Michael was completely set free. Years later, Michael and Grace started a business and became wealthy. Grace looks at Michael and smiles softly, her voice still honey-sweet and heaven-strong. She said,
Honey, do you know why I never stopped praying for you? Because when we were getting married, my mom told me to never stop praying, even when love hurts.
Michael nodded in silence. He said,
I will never leave you again.
And they both smiled. God restored their marriage, and after a few months, Grace became heavily pregnant. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to HeartLink Life for more faith-based videos like this. See you in the next video.